do I need an iPad? Should I get an iPad? Do I need a tablet? This is a question that I see a lot in the music teacher forums that I'm on, especially on Facebook, but also like things that I just have colleagues talk to me about in real life. So in this video, I want to talk to you about why it's a good idea and who it's a good idea for. So I want to talk about some of the benefits that you may not have thought of for having an iPad. Yes, obviously it's really great that you can have your score library virtually. That's super convenient. But I'm also going to talk about some things that you probably haven't thought about. If you've been considering, should I get an iPad? Do I need one? And you're trying to figure that out and figure out what's right for you, hopefully this video can help you out. Okay, so I think that the iPad is an incredible tool. It's super effective. It's really helped me on my music learning journey. It's helped me as a teacher. It's helped me be a better student. It's helped me learn roles faster. It has also helped me with like my lecturing jobs. Like there's just so many amazing things that I've done with this wonderful tool. Now, my iPad, I think I paid, I want to say $700 for it, and that I bought it used, so it was $700 used. I want to say, like, I understand that that is not a small amount of money. Here, I can show you mine. So this is my iPad. It's $700, but it came with like the Magic Keyboard. I understand that that's not a small amount of money, but I would also like to say that even if you are looking at the used market, there are so many things that you could find that are more cost effective than this. You can definitely find one for less than that. Okay, so I think the biggest and most obvious benefit of the iPad is just like the sheer amount of music that you can have with you at any given time. Any lesson I'm taking with my teacher, I probably have 3 to 4 books of repertoire that I need to bring with me. Any coaching that I'm taking, I probably have another different set of 3 to 4 books with me. And then other gigs that I'll have more music that I need to bring with me. And that's just like a lot of music that needs to go with me every day. The fact that it keeps my handbag handles from falling off. My bag was so heavy before I got the iPad that literally the straps on my bag would come off. It was destroying my back, my shoulders, and also like my handbags. And then, so now I have my iPad and basically I have my entire score library saved digitally. Now I do love a paper score and I have a pretty decent sized library of hard copy scores. But the fact that I have my music digitally saves me all the time. First of all, it's really amazing in my lessons that I'm taking because my teacher can just say like, oh, I think we should look at this repertoire, and I can pull it up like that. And so we can work on it right then instead of like, okay, let me remember to get that and I'll bring it to our lesson next week, and then maybe I don't remember to bring it, and then there's like, it's just like a whole thing. So, you know, for me, who's kind of forgetful, not lazy, but forgetful, it's very beneficial. It's also, you know, the same thing in coachings, it's very helpful. The other thing is like, I don't waste time in lessons that I'm teaching. You know when you want to give something to a student and you're like, oh my God, let me grab that score. And then you're like, I just saw this. I know where this score is. And you can literally spend like, I mean, I have so many scores. I can spend easily like 10 to 20 minutes looking for a score if I'm a little shaky on where it is, versus in my iPad, I can find any music I need in pretty much 30 seconds or less. I would say that like right off the bat, if the any iPad is in your budget and you are a person that interacts with a high volume of music on a daily to weekly basis, I think that this would be a fantastic investment for you. Now, here's my next point. Now that we got the most obvious point out of the way, grab your coffee, buckle up, here we go, talking about some of the more nuanced purposes of the iPad and things you probably haven't thought about as a musician. So one thing for me is it really helps me to learn music myself, just like as a musician. One of the things that I like to do when I am coaching a piece and learning a new piece, I'll coach it with lots of different people because I want lots of perspectives, I want lots of ideas. I like to have a fresh copy of music every time I go to a coaching with a new person because that helps me to keep track of who told me to do what. The iPad, that's obviously really, really easy. First of all, I'm not staring at like old markings from like 6 months ago trying to decipher my half erased handwriting, not trying to look through like 8 different people's suggestions. It's really nice to have a fresh copy, but also when you're printing music that gets very expensive, especially like, you know, I'm a coloratura soprano, so my music is really, really long. We've got tons of cadenzas. I was spending a ton of money on ink, and so it just wasn't an option to get a new version for every person I was coaching with. But now with the iPad, it's super simple, and I find that I take more detailed notes because I have more space, and also it's just easier to like reference all the people at once and be like, oh, what does this person tell me to do? What about that person? And it's just easier to keep track of who's telling me to do what and then like come up with my own interpretation. The other thing that the iPad helps me with is score prep, but probably not in the way that you've thought. So when I am learning a role, 100% hard copy of the score kind of person. I don't like using my iPad for doing a role. I like it for like maybe music that I'm working on in the shorter term, but if I'm learning a role and it's gonna be with me for a while, I am using a hard copy of the music. That's where all my score prep happens, and that's where all my rehearsing and like lessons and everything happens with the hard copy of the score. However, the iPad has been an amazing tool for score prep in the hard copy of the score. For example, so one of the most amazing things that I can do with the iPad is just the fact that I have access to my entire library of Nico Castell libretti resources at any moment, no matter where I am. For reference, Nico Castell has the IPA for the singers, and we love to reference that when we're preparing a role because, you know, I'm not fluent in all of the languages that I sing in, so sometimes I need to double check my translation, or there's a word that I'm like, I can't figure out what this means, I can't find it in any dictionary, or I can't figure out, is this a closed E, an open E, and that's when we want to consult the Castell. Now, the thing about the Castell libretti is they're insanely expensive, okay? So one of the things is like, I'm kind of afraid to take them with me anywhere because they're just like so pricey, but also you have so many scores in one book. Like every volume has, I want to say like anywhere between like 5 to 8 operas, so they're very thick, they're very, very heavy books, and so it's just not an option for me to bring an extra 10-pound book with me on any trip because I think I might need to consult it at some point. So when I'm preparing a score, it's nice, I can go to a cafe if I want and I can look at the Castell and I don't have to bring an extra 10-pound book with me, but also when I'm traveling, just the fact that I can prepare scores and have access to Castell librettis is amazing. It's also great for things like cadenzas, so like I have the Liebling cadenza book, a virtual copy of it. I also have a virtual copy of the Ricci cadenza book, and these are both really, really valuable resources that it's like I wouldn't think to travel with them all the time, but I do need them oftentimes when I'm gone. As a musician, I have a lot of different components of my job, so I teach music, right? Like I have students that I love teaching. I perform, so I have a lot of music that I myself need to prepare for lessons, and then I also have like lectures that I do, and so I find that the iPad is really, really helpful when I'm creating lectures, especially because there are so many different books and resources that I like to consult. And again, it's the same thing as the Castell libretti. So two of my favorite books to consult when I'm writing lectures or when I'm preparing lessons are The Structure of Singing by Richard Miller and also The Lives of the Great Composers by Schoenberg. And I find that I consult those books quite often, but also they are huge. They're each both well over 500 pages, and so they're probably about £5 each at the very least, and bringing them with me everywhere, even if it's just to a cafe that I want to work in or, you know, on a trip, it's not an option. You know, if I brought both of those books and a Castell volume with me, that would easily add probably £20 to my luggage, which when you can only bring a 50-pound bag with you, I mean, that's like half. That'd be half of my luggage in books that I have on my iPad that fits snugly in my carry-on. And that means that I don't have to bring 9 or 10 books that I may or may not actually end up using. One of the other really big benefits to having the iPad is just the fact that you don't have to spend so much money printing music. So I know personally I was spending basically like a small fortune on a weekly basis printing music because I'm the kind of person that like I always like to be looking at something new and just like finding a new piece to dig into, which means that I would have to have a copy of a piece for me, for my teacher, and for my coach, and it would just be like, I was printing so much music on a weekly basis. If you find that you're somebody who really likes to add extra music to your students' lessons and you're spending a lot of money printing things off of ISMLP and other public domain sites, I think the iPad is a really great option for you. My iPad has really come in handy as well as a tool for teaching. So like I said, I have a private studio, I enjoy teaching lessons, and it's just really nice to always be able to have access to a copy of the music that the students are playing. This is especially beneficial if you have a lot of students in different levels of method books for piano. Like I like Piano Adventures, and there's so many different levels, and instead of having like the whole collection of the Piano Adventure books, I just have some on my library, and I, you know, if my student is using a specific book, I'll make sure I have that copy, and that is really helpful, especially if you do virtual lessons, because it's not like you can look over their shoulder, so this is a really great thing. I also love just having my iPad with me in the lessons because it makes it really easy for me to show my students new recordings of music that they might not have heard. Like I was teaching a piano lesson to a girl and she didn't know who Liberace was, and so of course we have to watch a video of Liberace. So, you know, things like that, it just makes it easier for you to access content that's going to enrich their education. And then there's also lots of wonderful apps that I love to incorporate in lessons. So there's really cool apps that you can use for note learning, for rhythms. You can use really great apps for like backing tracks to help them work on their chord studies, chord progressions, or improv skills. And there's also just great apps to use for like metronomes and tuning, things like that. The iPad provides me a little bit more room for spur of the moment learning. So for the example, like, you know, the Liberace thing. She doesn't know who Liberace is. I don't have to go get my computer. I already have my iPad out because I always use it in lessons. And we can just pull it up, and I can make sure that if a student is interested in a specific piece of music, we can find it then and there for them. Another really amazing benefit of the iPad is if you do any kind of collaborative piano work. Now granted, I am definitely not a collaborative pianist, but I do accompany all of my voice lessons, and I find that even if my students bring me a copy of the music, I prefer to play off of my music because I want to play off of plates that I am already familiar with. So it can be really, really shocking when you look at a different edition of music than you're used to, and you just, it's like, I have no idea what this says. Oh my gosh, like my brain can't process it. I remember once I was teaching a student in our lesson, we were doing Molto di Gioia by Mozart, and I had been playing out of this one book and I couldn't find it online, so I found a different copy of the music, a different plate to play from, and it was like, I'm looking at the exact same music, but it's just in different spots on the page, and I was a wreck. It was terrible. So being able to look at my own plates and look at the scores that I'm already familiar with really, really helps me when I'm teaching. If you do a lot of collaborative piano work, I think that it would be really beneficial for you to have an iPad just so that you can always be looking at plates that you're familiar with. So for example, if you play for a lot of singers, I'm a singer, so you know, yeah, I think it would be really great for you to just like have the score editions that you prefer playing from. Like I know, for example, for a lot of the Mozart operas, the Schirmer score for some of them is more standard and it's a better reduction for the pianist versus like maybe the singer is looking at the Bärenreiter and that's really, really overwhelming and difficult for you to play. I mean, I was trying to reduce something from a Bärenreiter edition of Messiah the other day and it was a nightmare. Like it has so many cues written in, it's so overwhelming to look at, and so making sure that you have a copy of the music that you're familiar with that is not just totally like jarring and shocking is really helpful. Okay, traveling, like literally, I'm sorry, but if you are traveling at least 2 times a year for music related events, I would get an iPad. I think it's totally worth it. So what I used to do when I was traveling before I had my iPad is I would get PDFs of individual pieces that I thought I might potentially need while I was gone. I would upload them to Drive, and then when I did need them, I would have to beg the hotel concierge to please print the music for me. And so, I mean, half the time, honestly, like things would be printed wrong, they wouldn't print it double-sided, something would be just like weird. And it was just a whole ordeal. It was very frustrating. Now it's so easy. I just have my iPad and I'm regularly shocked at just like how often I need to reference a score that I didn't anticipate needing. And having my whole library at my fingertips when I travel allows me to do that, which has been so beneficial. Now I understand that for me, it's a little bit more of an extreme example. In the last year, I was gone for 8 months, which is a lot. And it's obviously not possible to bring every score that I need with me during all of those travels. And so virtual music has been an incredible resource. The other thing is when I'm traveling, there's a really good chance that the other people that I'm with are also traveling. And so they don't have access to their in-person, like tangible score libraries either. And so if we want to collaborate on something, it's really great that I have a PDF of the music that we can reference and I can share it with them. I find that most musicians who do a lot of traveling do have iPads. And so it just makes it a lot easier for us to work on the music when, you know, getting a copy of the score is not an issue. So if I'm not going to be gone longer than a month, I generally don't need to bring my laptop, which is actually really nice because it is quite a bit heavier than my iPad and it is quite a bit bulkier than my iPad. And though I would say that this is not like a reason to go out and like, you know, buy an iPad on its own, it is a nice thing to consider. It has also replaced my need for bringing a speaker with me when I travel. So when I travel and I take lessons, I usually previously had to bring a speaker with me so I could play tracks that would, you know, accompaniment tracks. And I find that these speakers on my iPad are just as good, if not better, than the speaker I was bringing traveling. And it's just one less thing to worry about, which is really nice. That is one of the biggest benefits of the iPad, is I feel like it's just so versatile and it replaces me needing to bring so many things with me when I travel. So, you know, when I travel, I don't have to bring a speaker, I don't have to bring reference books, I don't have to bring cadenza books, I don't have to bring Castell libretti, and I don't have to bring extra scores. I just have to bring my iPad. That eliminates a lot of weight when traveling, which is amazing. Before I bring up the last point, I just just wanted to thank you so much for watching this far in the video, and I wanted to say that it would really mean a lot to me if you would consider liking this video or subscribing to my channel if you have found this to be helpful or interesting. That really helps me know that this is a kind of content that you guys find helpful, and it supports me in making more of it. So thank you so much. Okay, the next point is a little bit weird, but it's the iPad has like really upped my game of advertising and marketing. So as somebody who is a freelancer, the big part of my job is shameless self-promotion, and the iPad has really helped me do that more efficiently. So when I want to recruit for my studio, I can go on my iPad and I can make really great advertisements on Canva, and also I can edit the photos that I'm using to get like higher quality, more striking images to advertise. This has also helped me to start like a little photography side hustle, which has been really cool. Basically this started as me taking and editing my own headshots during the pandemic because I needed new headshots, and then now it has just kind of snowballed into me doing headshots and photo editing for other people. The iPad has also allowed me to color grade and edit my audition videos, which has saved me a couple times when there was like a lighting fiasco and I had footage that would have been otherwise entirely unusable. So I absolutely recommend the iPad if you are looking to up your like branding and marketing game. I think it's super helpful. So I would say if you are gonna get a tablet, there's just a couple things I would recommend. Number one is make sure that it's going to work with other accessories that you're also interested in. So if you want to get like a pedal because you don't want to do page turns anymore, just make sure the tablet you're getting is going to work with the pedal you're interested in. I would also say to get something with a decent amount of memory. So I personally have most of my scores on Dropbox, which does not actually use up the memory on my iPad, but I do use a decent amount of storage space on the iPad by downloading scores and just like having to write in scores, so keep that in mind. Also things like lesson recordings, recital videos, all of that, it does take up a decent amount of space, so I would have a decent number of gigabytes on the tablet that you're gonna get. And I would also recommend something with a decent sized screen. So oftentimes I'll have a student look over my shoulder, or my coach will want to borrow my iPad to look at something really quick. And so you just want to make sure that it's a screen that's a size that you can really read. So I wouldn't get anything that's kind of like in the mini category. I recently got an iPad Pro, and I really do enjoy the fact that the screen is bigger than my iPad Air, but the iPad Air was totally an okay size. So that's something to keep in mind. Next question is, should I specifically get an iPad or will any tablet do? And I personally am a big fan of the iPad for the simple reason that AirDrop is really helpful. It's something I use all the time. And so if you're planning on collaborating with a lot of other musicians, I would recommend getting an iPad because you can do things like share lesson recordings, share recital recordings, which is like so helpful, audition videos, PDFs of music, you can like exchange resources. It's really, really helpful, and that AirDrop function makes it really, really like makes the iPad the best choice if you want to collaborate with other musicians. Now, if you're getting some sort of a tablet because you don't really need to collaborate with other musicians, like maybe you do mostly solo work, or you just have like a high volume of music at your church job, you're a pianist, you're sick of doing page turns, and you teach mostly lessons, and you don't need to like AirDrop so much, and you don't need to share music, I think that if there's another tablet that you have your eye on that's maybe at a better price point or has other features that you're really interested in that the iPad doesn't offer, I think that if you're not interested in collaborating with other musicians, or if you don't need to have the AirDrop function, I think other tablets can be a great option. I will be making a video on my favorite apps for musicians to use on iPad, so keep an eye out for that, because I think that there are some really, really cool apps that we can use to enrich our own learning as like lifelong musicians and learners, but also to help enrich our students' lesson experience. So keep an eye out for that because I am super psyched about it. But finally, I just wanted to sum up who I think really, really, really can benefit from an iPad. So I think that people who really, really would benefit from having a tablet are if you just are engaging with a high volume of music on a weekly and daily basis. I think that this can really simplify your life a lot. If you are tired of spending basically the equivalent of like a mortgage every month on printing, and you're using a lot of like free downloadable resources, I think the iPad is an amazing resource for you. And I would say anyone who is regularly traveling for more than like 2 weeks out of the year for music should definitely seriously consider getting a tablet of some sort, because it is incredible, absolutely life-changing, and just like saves me having to bring so many things with me when I travel. If you're concerned about the cost of an iPad or a tablet, I totally hear you. I had a tablet that like barely worked for the longest time because I did not want to part with the money to buy a new one, even though I really needed it. So I would recommend looking at used and refurbished markets, and if you're like feeling a little weird about that, you can go to the Apple store and buy refurbished iPads directly from them, so you know that they'll work. They also offer things like discounts for students and teachers, so if you are a student or like an educational professional, then that can be something that you might want to look into. You could also look at getting a slightly older model, so depending on what you need the iPad for, you probably don't need all of the bells and whistles and like newest features, so you would probably be able to get something that's a little bit older and get a slightly better price for it. Alright, thank you so much. That's it for me. I hope you enjoyed. Bye!